This is BBC News. I'm Jane Hill, live in Downing Street. The headlines at 9. Boris Johnson's successor as Prime Minister will be revealed at lunchtime today, when either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak is named the next Conservative leader. The new PM will inherit a flagging economy with inflation at a 40-year high and a cost of living crisis. We'll be assessing the challenges faced by the new occupant of number 10.
I will lower taxes.
What I will not do is pursue policies that risk making inflation far worse.
I'm Annita McVeigh. Our other main stories this hour. A charity has warned the government to abandon its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda after finding many of those selected may have been victims of torture. The High Court will hear legal challenges today. Barristers in England and Wales go on indefinite strike in their dispute with the government over pay. And Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, will address the opening ceremony of the One Young World Summit in Manchester this evening amidst continuing controversy over her relationship with the royal family.
Hello and a very good morning. Welcome to 10 Downing Street, where at lunchtime today we will find out who will be moving in here as the new Conservative leader and, of course, new Prime Minister. There's been several months of campaigning, 8 candidates originally, thousands of votes. And in a couple of hours from now, we will find out whether it is Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak who will be moving into number 10 behind me. They officially become Prime Minister, in fact, tomorrow, of course, and that brings Boris Johnson's 3-year premiership to an end. Let's start our coverage today with this report from our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
I'm always going to respond to support people through it.
I would reverse the increase in national insurance.
The NHS will be safe in my hands.
I want everybody across our great country to have opportunity.
After 6 weeks of slugging it out, it's no longer time for campaigning, but for governing. And today we discover whether it's Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak who gets the keys to Downing Street. Pollsters have declared Liz Truss the favourite. And if she wins today, she said she will announce substantial support to help with the cost of living within a week.
I understand that people are struggling with eye-watering energy bills, and there are predictions of even worse down the track. If I'm elected as Prime Minister, I will act immediately on bills and on energy supply.
If Rishi Sunak pulls off an upset, he said he'd target more help to the most vulnerable. But thoughts are also turning to what he'll do if he doesn't get the top job.
I'm going to stay as a Member of Parliament, and I was really delighted. Actually, I finished this campaign on Friday at home in Yorkshire with my own members, which was really lovely. And it's been a great privilege to represent them as their Member of Parliament for Richmond and North Yorkshire. I'd love to keep doing that as long as they'll have me.
So with Downing Street preparing to welcome the new Prime Minister, how did we get here? Well, we've had a summer of heated debates and competing policy pledges. But the whole process only got underway after Partygate had undermined Boris Johnson's authority. Then his handling of sexual assault allegations against the government whip was the final straw for many of his own ministers.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister.
There's no shortage of Conservative MPs who wanted to replace him, but in a series of votes, their fellow Tories whittled the candidates down to the final 2.
Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will be the candidates going forward.
The contest moved from Westminster to the wider membership, who quizzed the candidates at events around the country. The big division was over whether to cut taxes now or later. While the venues changed, the key messages didn't, with the same lines repeated again.
I will lower taxes.
What I will not do is pursue policies that risk making inflation far worse.
And again.
We need to keep our taxes low.
What I will not do is pursue policies that risk making inflation far worse.
The biggest challenge for the new Prime Minister is to tackle the UK's cost of living crisis. but uniting their party after a bruising 2-month battle may be no less difficult. Ian Watson, BBC News.
The issue was when we had...
Well, let's just remind you of the order of events today. We will be here throughout the day to take you through it, of course, but that key moment is scheduled for 12:30. That is the time we are being given. That is the moment at which we will find out whether it is either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak who has won that ballot of Conservative Party members. The Queen will then formally appoint that person to their post tomorrow. And as we know, that is all happening at Balmoral. In a break from tradition, it's not going to be at Buckingham Palace or Windsor, it will be at Balmoral. And then here, outside this door, at lunchtime tomorrow, we will hear from the new occupant of Downing Street. And then the new Prime Minister starts to appoint their new government team. It's expected the first cabinet meeting will take place on Wednesday, before the new leader of the Conservative Party, of course, has their first outing at Prime Minister's Questions, as traditional on a Wednesday lunchtime. But we will, as ever today, be thinking about what lies ahead. The new Prime Minister has a monumental task, both economically and politically. Rising inflation and high energy prices are at the forefront of voters' minds, with businesses keen to see stability and a commitment to economic growth going forward. Let's just hear the thoughts of our economics editor Faisal Islam, because he's been taking a look at some of those pressing issues that the new Prime Minister is immediately going to face.
This is the economic reality, the picture facing the new Prime Minister. Inflation at 10%, heading for 15%, perhaps 20%, 5, even 10 times target. The economy generally already falling and heading for a 1990s-style recession, according to the Bank of England. And the core of it all, energy prices. Look at this, an average household's inflation-adjusted energy bill over the past few decades until now, and real questions about whether households can actually afford that line at the end. Whilst the war in Ukraine continues, there's little chance of energy prices falling significantly. So what can the next leader do? We're expecting some sort of significant effort to help people with bills with the help of public money, or a system of repayment on bills over several years. As yet, there's no detail though. If Liz Truss wins, she says she'll help people keep more of their money by cutting taxes, like reversing this year's rise in national insurance and cancelling a planned £17 billion rise in taxes on corporate profits. But trying to do all this at the same time would require a lot more borrowing at a delicate time in the markets. It is, to sum up, an economically troubling time with an ominous decision over what to prioritise: the energy rescue or tax cuts, needing to be made within days and impacting every household in the country.
Faisal Islam there, our economics editor. Well, let's talk polling first of all, before we move on, of course, to talk a lot about the economy and the cost of living. Let's talk to Chris Hopkins, who is Associate Director at Savanta Comres, a market research consultancy which tracks political opinion and voting intention. Chris, hello, a very good morning to you. It's going to be a shock to everybody, I think, if Rishi Sunak is announced as the winner at lunchtime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ever since MPs started voting and the first opinion polls were conducted, it didn't appear that Rishi Sunak was particularly popular among the Conservative membership. And in fact, I think even before ballots dropped and members did start voting, it felt like a bit of a foregone conclusion that Liz Truss was going to be Prime Minister. And this feels a bit more like a coronation today than a time where we actually find out who is going to be the next Prime Minister. Obviously, it could still be Rishi Sunak. Apparently, turnout was pretty low until very recently. That should favour Sunak, but I think the real question today is how close the race ends up being. It does appear to have been the foregone conclusion for a long time that Liz Truss is going to be the next Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Yes, if she's not, it's a bad day for pollsters, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be. I mean, we didn't poll the leadership election ourselves. I think the membership polling generally is quite difficult. You know, the demographic data for the Conservative membership is pretty unknown, kept under lock and key. So it is quite hard to do this type of thing. But there's been so many more polls this time compared to 2019 when Boris Johnson was elected, and ultimately this type of polling does have a pretty good track record, and therefore I think it would be a massive shock to everybody if Rishi Sunak ends up being Prime Minister today. And even throughout the campaign, we've seen Rishi Sunak leading among MPs to begin with, and they've seemed to jump ship towards Liz Truss. So obviously Conservative MPs are also aware which way the wind has been blowing throughout the campaign.
And I think it's worth reminding people, actually, the very small number of people, though, who've had a vote in this. The membership thought to be about 160,000 people. So it is 160,000 people out of a nation of more than 60 million who gets to decide who walks through that door tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've found that a majority of the public think that that's quite an undemocratic way to go about things. But actually, in recent times, more and more prime ministers have been have walked out of the door and then come in the door without there being a general election. It seems to be becoming more and more common at the minute that there's this sort of quirk to our democracy where party members end up choosing not just their next leader but the next prime minister as well. So yeah, Theresa May come about in exactly the same way. So it seems to be not as unprecedented as perhaps it might have been 10, 15 years ago.
And just a quick thought, Chris, as well about national polling. Talk will inevitably turn to the next general election. Very striking looking at some national opinion polls over the last few weeks while we've all been watching this race continue, and putting Labour with a strong lead. How much do we know about what's been done comparing Sir Keir Starmer on one side for Labour versus either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, it's a good opportunity for the new Conservative leader to have a bit of a clean slate. Boris Johnson and Partygate and some of the other allegations that were made against his government were quite toxic for the Conservative brand. And in fact, the longer that Boris Johnson held on, the worse and worse that got. So in a way, the new leader has a completely clean slate. But at the same time, they are inheriting an in-trade that no Prime Minister would be particularly keen on. Your economics editor just then was talking about the economic issues that the country is facing, but there are also global issues, potential pressure on the NHS this winter too. So it's not necessarily, it feels like a bit of a poison chalice ultimately that they're coming into, as well as a backdrop and probably just half a term for them to really make their pitch to the public. So they are on the back foot to begin with, but what also works in their advantage is that the public aren't that enamoured with Keir Starmer and Labour either, and therefore they do have an opportunity to try and win back some of those votes that have been lost to the Labour Party throughout Boris Johnson's prime ministerial tenure. But at the same time, it's such a difficult economic backdrop that if the blame for that is laid at the Conservative Party door, it doesn't really matter who the next leader is. They're going to face a real uphill battle before they are returned to 10 Downing Street at the next election.
Very interesting. Thanks so much, Chris. Thank you, Chris Hopkins, Associate Director at Savanta Comres. We're going to talk more about that economic picture, as you would expect, over the course of the morning. Just to explain why Chris is standing outside the QE2 Centre, in fact, the Queen Elizabeth Conference Centre. That's in a different part of Westminster, over the way behind our production team here. And that is because that actually is the venue where the announcement will be made. So it's very, very busy down there right now at the QE2 Conference Centre. Then later in the day, attention turns here at number 10. Sir Graham Brady from the 1922 committee will announce that at that centre where Chris was talking to us from. But as we've been reflecting, as Chris was just mentioning again, the next Prime Minister is inheriting one of the most difficult economic challenges in decades. Our business correspondent Nina Warhurst has been talking to people in Leeds about their concerns.
Welcome to Leeds Kirkgate Market. You know, there are days when the happenings of Westminster can feel a million miles away from places like this. Not today. 600 stalls, the biggest covered indoor market in Europe. Have a look up there. It's been going for more than 150 years, and this place, well, it wants to keep on thriving. The challenge for the new Prime Minister is to protect, support and help businesses while inflation is at above 10%, while interest rates are going up. Let's have a chat then about what it's looking like for businesses. Martin is from the Federation of Small Businesses. Have you ever known it so challenging for them?
No, I've been in business 35 years and this is as bad as it's ever been. There's a lot of businesses hanging on by their fingernails. Taxes are really high, demand's low and cash is running out. We need urgent action from government now.
What would that look like?
Well, we know that there are the biggest things that hurt businesses are the taxes that apply before they make any profit. So that's things like business rates, national insurance. We need the government to recognise that the current energy bills and these kind of taxes are really hurting.
And what you said to me earlier is whatever happens, it needs to happen now. Let's talk to Phil, who runs a bookstore on the high street. It's been in the family for nearly 30 years. Challenging times though. What do you need to see?
I think it's a debate about the local economy. It's extremely precarious, even coming out of the lockdown period. The traditional nature of the high street hasn't been properly discussed. There's been no long-term strategy for it. I think in terms of specifics, we'd look at an overhaul of the business rates, particularly for small businesses, a lowering of VAT. It's an indirect tax that's affecting everybody's ability to spend at the moment. Clearly we need some certainty over our overheads with heating and lighting and things like that, and the cost of living crisis is going to make everybody's product become a luxury, and that's the problem for us.
Can you afford that book if you can't afford to heat your house, of course? Levelling up, does that mean anything? Has that meant anything?
Sadly not. It's another of those list of promises that have never been fulfilled. I think you can add Northern Powerhouse to that, which became a couple of words with nothing really behind it. I think we do feel a little disenfranchised up here. We're at the home of where Marks and Spencer started, at a stall just down from us, and you just wonder, would they have been able to put up with some of the things that we are now having to give them the longevity that they've had.
Fingers crossed for a fourth decade. Thank you, Phil. And Mary works in the care sector. Let's find out from her the pressure that you've been under. You said to me earlier, it's at crunch point, it's at breaking point. Do you foresee more carers leaving unless something changes?
Yes. One of the carers, a fabulous carer that looked after my mum, she's gone and got a job in Marks and Spencer's because she sees more of a future, that they look after her better, and she was brilliant at her job. And we've got to ask, how can we allow that to happen? That retail is a more exciting job, gives you more benefits than looking after some most vulnerable people in our society. So the government have to recognise that if social care breaks, then the NHS breaks and everything around it. So they need to look at putting funding in, protecting the unpaid carers that mesh all that together. Look after them financially, but also emotionally. The mental health system is broken and people don't realise what it's like, and it's about time that a Prime Minister who's been part of a government who's absolutely wrecked social care gets a grip and looks after the people that look after the most vulnerable in our society.
Thank you, Mary. And we wait to see. Both candidates have, of course, pledged that they will address funding in the NHS and in social care. You can't overstate the scale of the challenge for the next Prime Minister. The pound has been wobbling, debt is at a record high, and the energy fluctuations, well, that's outside of their control. It's been a long and gruelling campaign, but in some ways, the real work starts now.
Nina Warhurst there in Leeds. 18 minutes past 9. Good morning. If you are just joining us, we are live in Downing Street today. For obvious reasons, I think we will find out at lunchtime whether it is Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak who will be inheriting all those economic problems and concerns that Nina has just been outlining there. Not just domestic issues that will face whoever walks through this door behind me tomorrow as well, though, because the UK has been one of Ukraine's most stalwart backers since Russia invaded the country 6 months ago. President Zelensky and Boris Johnson have enjoyed a close relationship. So what could a new Prime Minister mean for the continuing brutal conflict in Ukraine? Let's go to the capital, Kyiv, and join our correspondent, Hugo Bachega there. Hugo, morning to you. To what extent, frankly, is domestic politics in this country even being talked about? Are people cognizant of it where you are?
Good morning, Jane. Yeah, I think people are paying attention. They know that there will be a change in Downing Street in the UK. And obviously, people know that the UK has been one of the main allies in terms of military support, in terms of diplomatic support. And I think Boris Johnson has been an extremely popular figure here because of the support he's been given to this country, but also because of the very strong statements he's been given when it comes to President Vladimir Putin, saying that President Putin needs to be defeated. So people here obviously enjoy this level of support that's coming from the UK. But people also know that there is a cost of living crisis in the UK. People are very concerned about rising energy bills, and I think it's something that we're starting to hear from high-level officials here in this country. Over the weekend, President Zelensky accusing Russia of using gas and energy as a weapon, trying to hit European countries that can't attack with missiles with gas, and cutting off gas supplies and all the rest of it. And even the First Lady, Olena Zelenska, speaking to the BBC, saying that as the UK counts pennies, we're counting casualties. So people are paying attention, and I think the hope is that the change in number 10 will not result in a change in terms of the level of support that the UK has been giving to Ukraine.
Absolutely. And Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, of course, so known in some quarters where you are. While you're with us, Hugo, as well, though, talk to us about the latest situation on the ground, the latest with the Ukrainian troops, and still, of course, enormous concern about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant.
Yeah, exactly. And we understand that a team of the International Atomic Energy Agency remain at the Zaporizhzhia power plant. We should get an update on the situation tomorrow when the head of the IAEA briefs the United Nations Security Council. In terms of the military developments, we had an update last night from President Zelensky saying that there were some good reports coming from the front lines. He said the Ukrainian army managed to retake 2 villages in the south of the country, a 3rd village in the east. He also talked about some territory being liberated in the east of the country. And for more than a week now, we've been talking about this operation by the Ukrainian army against Russian forces, especially in the south, especially around the city of Kherson, which is a city that's been under Russian occupation since the very beginning of the war. It is one of the largest Ukrainian cities in Russian hands. But at the same time, we've heard from a number of officials in recent days warning people to not expect any kind of major military advance in the near future, saying that any kind of major gangs will take some time before it happens.
Hugo, thank you very much for now. Hugo Bachega there, our correspondent in Ukraine's capital. And let's just take a moment to think about how the new Prime Minister will be received in other parts of the world as well. Particularly, let's focus on Europe. This morning, the French Foreign Minister said she hoped it would be a new start in relations between the two countries. Whoever wins, whoever's announced as that winner at lunchtime today. Let's just test the temperature in Brussels and get the thoughts of our Europe correspondent, Jessica Parker. How much attention, perhaps I should ask, is paid to all of this that has exercised minds in this country for the last couple of months, Jessica?
Well, not nearly so much attention. You wouldn't be particularly surprised to hear. But to be honest with you, here in Brussels, the main talk of the town is the energy crisis and what the EU and what member states are going to do to try and build up their supplies, especially after that key pipeline, the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, was unexpectedly shut on Saturday, and how to protect consumers and businesses as well. They will pay some attention to who the new UK Prime Minister is, but it isn't top of the agenda. Having said that, there is an ongoing, unresolved dispute between the United Kingdom and the EU. That is, of course, the post-Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland. And Liz Truss, the front runner, the person who's expected to be announced as the new Conservative Party leader today, the architect of some very controversial legislation that could essentially override parts of that treaty that both sides agreed for those special arrangements for Northern Ireland, then went down very badly with the European Union. Obviously, they're not really expecting a huge change in approach, given she was the architect of that legislation, is now likely to step through the doors of number 10. However, I think there'll be some curiosity to see what she does and says over the next few days and few weeks. I think the feeling here is that some of what you've heard during that Tory leadership campaign has been candidates playing to the crowd. That's certainly what they think here. And then the reality of government will set in. And it will be up to Liz Truss and up to the EU as well in terms of where they go with that dispute over those post-Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland and whether they escalate further.
Yes, much more to come from you. Thanks for now. That's Jessica Parker there in Brussels. And let's just close this half hour of coverage with our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, and get the thoughts and look ahead to what today and tomorrow holds. Hi, Nick. We find out at lunchtime, of course. Goodness, I mean, we're all talking, everybody is talking, as if it is Liz Truss, as if it's a done deal. Just your thoughts on that, your sense of that, what you hear from the people you talk to.
Well, look, we can't be certain until just after 12:30, but you won't find anyone around Westminster who's predicting anything other than a Liz Truss win. Even Rishi Sunak's close allies are saying he probably won't lose by that much, but they're not predicting he'll win. So everybody's preparing for Liz Truss to walk into that building tomorrow as Prime Minister for the first time. And you know, there's a lot for her to think about. There are a lot of challenges for the new Prime Minister to face up to, but there's one that's going to dominate. It's energy, and it's the cost of living crisis.
Yes.
That is going to define her first few hours, weeks and months in power.
Yes, and how much are we hearing? What sort of hints are we hearing? Just bring us right up to date with what her camp has been suggesting about what might be done, because time is of the essence. From everyone we've interviewed in the last few months, people want something done now.
I think you'll hear from her probably on Thursday about her plan. It will involve tens of billions of pounds. It could be on a similar scale to the spending we saw for furlough during the pandemic. One of the things that has been discussed with her team and energy companies is the idea of freezing the price cap at a level that it is just now, which would last a few months. Now, that's not guaranteed. Team Truss are not saying that that's definitely going to happen. The energy companies seem to think it's an increasing possibility that she could sign up to that, but nothing confirmed just yet. Her team are still saying she wants to get behind that door. She wants her new Chancellor in number 11, almost certainly Kwasi Kwarteng, to look at the books and tell us all later this week exactly what she's going to do.
But a possible energy price cap freeze, is that, and forgive me, is that very similar to the Labour proposal?
It's not dissimilar. The plan that's been suggested by the energy companies is slightly different in that it's basically a loan. The government would underwrite a loan to the energy companies, and it would then be paid back over a few years. Our bills would stay higher for longer.
Yeah.
As I say, absolutely not guaranteed just yet, but one of those things that is being discussed and not being denied by Team Truss this morning is a serious possibility.
OK, we'll talk again very soon. Thanks very much for now. Nick Eardley, our chief political correspondent, and much more from here in Downing Street over the course of the morning, course of the day, I should say, and tomorrow. So we find out at lunchtime who the new leader of the Conservative Party is. That means they are Prime Minister, of course, but that formal process doesn't actually happen until tomorrow. From here in Downing Street for now, I'll just hand you back to Annita.
Jane, thank you very much. Back with Jane soon, but let me bring you right up to date with the day's other main news. And police in Canada are hunting for two men after at least 10 people were killed and 15 others injured in a series of mass stabbings. The attacks took place across 13 locations in Saskatchewan province. Jessica Murphy reports.
Police say it could be the largest mass casualty event in Saskatchewan history. It's an incident Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called horrific and heartbreaking. Saskatchewan police say they received the first report of a stabbing just before 6 a.m. local time from James Smith Cree Nation, an Indigenous community of about 2,000 people. Soon more calls began to come in, with police confirming on Sunday evening that multiple people had been killed and more injured. That's across 13 sites in James Cree and the nearby town of Weldon. There is now a major manhunt underway.
Let me be clear. We are still looking for the two suspects. We are asking residents across Saskatchewan and our neighboring provinces to be vigilant. At this stage in our investigation, we believe some of the victims have been targeted by the suspect and others have been attacked randomly.
Police say they are looking for Damian Sanderson and Miles Sanderson, who were last reported seen by a member of the public in the city of Regina. Police say the relationship between the two is not yet clear. A dangerous persons alert is now in place across 3 Canadian provinces: Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. Jessica Murphy, BBC News, Toronto.
And it's almost 9:30. It's time for a look at the weather forecast with Matt Taylor. Morning to you, Matt. And lots of people this morning talking about the lightning overnight.
Yeah, spectacular across parts of England and Wales in particular. Annita, very good morning to you. Over 36,000 lightning strikes through the night. It meant for a bit of a disturbed night. A few blue eyes this morning, myself included. But after that, actually a pretty pleasant September's day to come for many. All that's left of our area of rain which brought the thunderstorms is just some wet weather across the north of Scotland, become confined to Orkney and Shetland by the end of lunchtime. A few showers, maybe they'll rumble of thunder though brewing towards the south later, but some gaps between them. Many places here will be staying dry. In fact, for many of you, it should be a fine afternoon with some sunny spells and feeling quite warm. Temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Bit breezy though in Orkney and Shetland, quite windy towards the far southwest. We'll see another batch of heavy and thundery rain work its way in this evening. In fact, Western England, Wales, most prone to some thundery downpours tonight. A few in Northern Ireland, Isle of Man and later into Scotland. Further south and east though, we will see some clearer conditions and a warm enough start to Tuesday. Temperatures at around 13 to 16. As for Tuesday, greater chance of a few showers coming your way. There'll certainly be more around, but still, some of you avoid them altogether. Probably the wettest spots will be across parts of southwest England, parts of Wales and parts of central southern Scotland. But some of you will stay dry tomorrow, a little bit cooler than today, but still warm in the sunshine.
Hello, good morning. This is BBC News with me, Annita McVeigh. The headlines for you. Boris Johnson's successor as UK Prime Minister will be revealed later when either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak is named next Conservative leader. The winner is expected to be announced around 12:30. We'll bring you full coverage here at BBC News. Police in Canada are hunting for 2 suspects after 10 people were stabbed to death in a series of attacks in a remote Indigenous community. A new challenge to the plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda will be held at the High Court today. A charity has warned the government that many of those selected for deportation may have been victims of torture. Barristers in England and Wales have gone on indefinite strike in their dispute with the government over pay. The Criminal Bar Association is asking for a 25% rise in pay for legal aid work. And Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, will address the opening ceremony of the One Young World Summit in Manchester this evening amidst continuing controversy over her relationship with the royal family. It's time for sport now. Let's join John Watson at the BBC Sports Centre. Morning, John.
Thanks, Annita. Very good morning. Hello, everyone. Of the £1 billion that Manchester United have spent on signings since Alex Ferguson left the club, Erik ten Hag, their current manager, says the £85 million new signing Anthony, who scored on his debut against Arsenal yesterday, could be the missing piece of the jigsaw. They came through 3-1 at Old Trafford. It was a debut to remember for the new Brazilian signing, who scored after half an hour. Bukayo Saka equalised for Arsenal, who had won 5 out of 5.
I have to credit the spirit from this team. They can deal with setbacks, and so we did. And that's really great that a team can do that. That shows your mentality. I think we really improved on that fact. We have the right characters, and now it's about cooperation, get the resilience in, deal with setbacks, but also believe. And you see there still is room for improvement.
It's really disappointing because looking back the game, for these boys to play the way they have played here, big credit to them, but we have to come out of the game with a much better result. If we keep performing and playing like that, we will be football matches, that's for sure. But we need, especially in these matches, more discipline to get the 3 points.
Arsenal still top the table despite the defeat, but if you're picking your top 4...
Our performances as a group have always been quite strong, even though the results haven't always matched those performances. They've been strong, so it's nice the last few weeks or months that we're getting the results and the performances. We have to carry on because the Premier League is what it is. It's so difficult, but it's a humble group, it's an ambitious group, and we want to try and compete in every game.
Are we seeing a new Nick Kyrgios? He's ended Daniil Medvedev's defence of his US Open title. The 27-year-old Australian demonstrating all of his brilliant shot-making and propensity for drama in a brilliant 4 sets win in the last 16. In the women's single. We've shown you some brilliant goals this morning. How about a brilliant putt? This was England's Oliver Wilson, hoping to pull one off from all of 65 feet, just the 65 foot, during the final round of the Maiden Himmerland in Denmark. And he saw it drop in. It saw him take a one-shot lead to the final hole. The former Ryder Cup player went on to win his first tournament here on the DP World Tour for 8 years. A moment to savour. Now, it was a weekend to forget, though, for Lewis Hamilton, who saw his hopes of a first Formula One victory of the season evaporate. Max Verstappen immediately overtook him after a late safety car and went on to claim his 10th win of the season at the Dutch Grand Prix. It extends his championship lead to 109 points with 7 races remaining. Hamilton blaming his Mercedes team for tactics that saw him end up finishing off the podium, down in 4th. And that is all from me at the BBC Sports Centre for now. I'll hand you back to Jane Hill, who's at Downing Street this morning. Jane.
Thanks, John. Hello, good morning. Thank you and welcome back to Downing Street. You'll know why we're here, of course. At lunchtime today, we find out who has been chosen as the new Conservative Party leader, and therefore who tomorrow will be moving into number 10 behind me. But what an in-tray awaits whoever is the winner. So let's take a few minutes to discuss just what is in that in-tray and more besides, with two people who follow these events very closely indeed. Anne McElvoy, Executive Editor at The Economist, and Sebastian Payne, Whitehall Editor of The Financial Times. Morning to both of you. And you are, I think, both down, yes, you're both down there at the QE2 Centre, of course, because that's where we get the announcement at lunchtime today. Anne McElvoy, first of all, whoever is announced as winner at lunchtime, can you think of a set of circumstances, particularly economic circumstances, that a new incumbent at number 10 has had to face?
I think it's very difficult to think of any comparison in not even just living memory, but going back a very long way for prime ministers who had quite so much going on at once in terms of the economic problems that they're going to face, but also the geopolitical situation and the way these things are playing into each other. I sometimes think back, I wasn't there, thank goodness I'm still young enough to say I wasn't there when Jim Callaghan fell, but you can also sort of see that 1979 feeling a bit in the air with some industrial unrest coming into the autumn. But in a sense, that was also a story that was playing out. In this case, it's almost new threats, new crises that are coming thick and fast, and where the economic answer that whoever the new Prime Minister is might want to give to suit their views is also going to have a very brutal reality check with the markets, with inflation, and of course with the energy crisis.
Yes, Sebastian Payne, you're nodding through some of that. I mean, people might be following all this coverage thinking, why on earth would someone want the job, frankly, at the moment?
Well, I think for Boris Johnson, you know, obviously he's leaving Downing Street tomorrow as Prime Minister, and I think he might actually look back in a couple of months and think, I'm rather glad, in fact, actually I wasn't still there, because there are no really good answers to the crisis we find ourselves at the moment. There's lots of reports in the papers today. Liz Truss is going to have to spend £100 billion to try and get the country through the winter and try and deal with energy bills. That's a huge sum of money that's going to have very big economic consequences. And I think there's a lot of concern, certainly with my Financial Times hat on, about how the markets are going to react to this, with a new Prime Minister going to load all this money onto the UK's already very large debt pile. But yes, Anne was mentioning Jim Callaghan when he became Prime Minister in the late 70s, and he was asked, I think at that point, what he felt about the future of the country, and he said to someone, oh my dear boy, if I was young I would emigrate right now. So we're maybe not quite at that stage yet, but things are clearly quite bad for the new Prime Minister coming in. And I think Liz Truss, you know, in some respects, expectations are quite low, that there's been this general sense that the crisis is so big, even if she does a passable, decent response, she'll come out of it well. But I just think it's going to be a very, very difficult time, not just for the Prime Minister, but for the country as well. And I wouldn't envy them. And the in-tray is just overflowing. And of course, on top of all that as well, you've got a very restive Conservative Party. If Liz Truss wins by, say, 60% or even below that when it's announced at lunchtime today, that's going to give big questions on, does she have the mandate for big economic reform, the types we've been hearing about?
Yes, and I do want to ask both of you about that. I mean, Anne, it is fascinating. It is worth restating, isn't it, that this decision is made by approximately 160,000 people in a nation of more than 60 million. So Are questions going to be asked? Is there going to be debate when this is all over, when the new incumbent is here behind me in Downing Street, as to whether even this process has been right? The duration, the way that which sort of candidates come through, the selection of candidates that come through. Are there going to be questions?
Well, there are questions, but I always think this is a bit of a red herring. This is the process by which the parties choose leaders, and it is not uncommon to switch leaders inside a parliamentary term. That happened from Tony Blair to Gordon Brown. I think what will happen is there will be intense focus, as Sir Payne was just reflecting there, on this first package of measures, and whether Liz Truss, in a way, if I've been comparing it in something I've been writing, to doing one of those kind of mogul runs in skiing along the edge of a ravine. I mean, if she gets through that, I think that there will be a sense of, well, let's see now what else she has on offer for the UK, and particularly for our economic outlook, and of course social and economic outlook, because people's livelihoods, people's lives and the way that they live day to day is very much linked to that broad economic picture. To me, I think the question of whether, I think it's now, so we hear, they don't tell us exactly, slightly more than 160,000 Tory members, but they are the selectorate, and that's what the constitution of the party says, and that's not uncommon. I think we'll move on from that to the question of, well, did the party get the right person to take the country, or as near as damn it the right person to take the country through a situation which is unenviable? But I would say, just to slightly offset, I wouldn't want to do it, which I know is a sort of view that a lot of us have around Westminster. Liz Truss really wants to do this. She's prepared to do. That's why, if she is, as is widely expected, the new Prime Minister, I should say, hedging my bets just before the announcement, the reason that she will have won is that she wanted to do it, and she was prepared to fight that political battle inside the party to do so. So it would be interesting to see whether that determination, or indeed if it is Rishi Sunak, which would be a lot more surprising, that determination, how does it translate to this situation, to that in-tray? Yes, they will find it intimidating, but no doubt at all, somebody always wants to be Prime Minister. We shouldn't forget that.
Yeah, well, no, that is an interesting point and a fair point worth remembering. And Seb, again, nodding through some of that, you've mentioned that it will be interesting to look at the mandate, the percentage of breakdown of the vote. What sort, again, to hedge like Anne, assuming it's Liz Truss, what sort of character of cabinet are we going to see? What's the tone, what's the flavour going to be?
So it's going to be quite different from Boris Johnson's cabinet, actually, that if you think of the top few people, they're not going to be those who are in the top rung of Boris Johnson's government, that we've got a pretty good idea of the key players. So Kwasi Kwarteng, who's currently Business Secretary, he's a dead cert to be Chancellor. Suella Braverman, who is the Attorney General, she is set to be Home Secretary, and James Cleverly, the Education Secretary, is set to be Foreign Secretary. And what all those people have in common, they're all big Liz Truss backers. They're all loyalists who got in on her leadership campaign very early. But when you get down the lower levels of the cabinet, it does get a bit more ideologically diverse. So, for example, Brandon Lewis, the former Northern Ireland Secretary, who again backed her, he's very much at the left of the party. He's probably going to get a substantial job, as is Tom Tugendhat, who's the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, very much on the left of the Tory party. So I think it will be a bit more diverse, certainly some fresher faces, but the key thing throughout, at least the cabinet, are people who have backed Liz Truss from the hilt from the beginning. Now, in the junior ministerial ranks, what I'm hearing from her campaign is that where they will reach out to Rishi Sunak supporters, so some of the more prominent ministers who backed his campaign will get jobs, but not the top jobs. And of course, that leads to the question of Mr. Sunak himself. I don't think we'll be seeing him in the cabinet. There's been so much what they call blue on blue action between the two candidates. I can't see what kind of ministry he could take. He couldn't take any economic ministry because he's so ideologically opposed to what she's doing. So that rules out obviously the Treasury, business, environment, you name it, levelling up. He couldn't take any of those jobs. So I imagine he will be retreating off to the back benches, having a bit of time to lick his wounds. And then when we get into the winter and the real economic crisis, then we might start to hear a bit more from him. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this cabinet pans out. But the one thing I would say is they're maybe not the most experienced people. The only person in that cabinet who's been in government since the Tories returned in 2010 is Brandon Lewis. Nearly everybody else came in 2015 or 2017 in many cases. And given the scale of the challenge we've got, that's not a huge amount of political or Whitehall experience to be running a country.
Very, very interesting thoughts on which to end. You preempted me, Seb, because I was going to ask you what you thought Rishi Sunak might be doing, assuming that he is the runner-up today. But thank you very much both, as ever, for your insight. More to come from you in the coming days, I'm quite sure. Sebastian Payne from the FT and Anne McElvoy from The Economist. Much more from here at the top of the hour. The announcement, just to remind you, is due at 12:30. Full coverage from here today throughout. For now, though, from Downing Street, it's back to Annita.
Jane, thank you very much. The High Court is hearing a challenge against the government's plan to deport some asylum seekers to Rwanda. In April, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, signed what she described as a world-first agreement with Rwanda to try to deter migrants from crossing the Channel. But the first deportation flight, due to take off on the 14th of June, was grounded amid a series of legal challenges. From today, millions of people in England and Wales will be invited for their autumn COVID booster vaccine. Care home residents will be the first in line for the jab, as health bosses predict a resurgence of COVID and flu this winter. Wales has already started offering boosters, while the rollout will begin in Northern Ireland in 2 weeks' time.
It's really important for the NHS that people take up their vaccines when offered. This is particularly true of the flu vaccine programme, which will be commencing over the next several weeks, and also the COVID-19 vaccine programme. It is certainly the case that our NHS is under considerable stress, and the more we can do to stop ourselves getting respiratory infections that lead us to need hospital care, the better it will be for the NHS.
Police investigating the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell have arrested 3 men. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder of Olivia's mother. 2 other men have been detained on suspicion of assisting an offender. Barristers in England and Wales are going on continuous strike from today following a row with the government over pay. The Criminal Bar Association is asking for a 25% rise in pay for legal aid work. That's representing defendants who couldn't otherwise afford lawyers. Members have rejected the government's pay offer, saying it wouldn't kick in immediately or apply to existing cases. Sancha Berg has more.
It's becoming a familiar sight in this summer of strikes. Criminal barristers in front of the courts rather than arguing cases inside. Now they've stepped up their action to an indefinite strike from today. That will halt activity across England and Wales, adding to the backlog of almost 60,000 cases. The government has offered a 15% rise in legal aid fees for new cases, but the barristers say they need to rise by 25% as soon as possible. They say 300 young barristers left criminal practice last year because they couldn't afford to stay.
Criminal barristers do not want to take action. They want to be in court doing what they do and doing what they've done for decades without having had to take this action. However, it's hit crisis point, and only this action was considered by barristers to get government to take the crisis within the criminal justice system seriously.
Dominic Raab, on the left, as Justice Secretary, refused to talk to the barristers. They're hoping that a new Secretary of State will take a different approach. Sancha Berg, BBC News.
For the first time since moving to California with Prince Harry more than 2 years ago, the Duchess of Sussex is due to speak at a public event in the UK. Amidst continuing controversy over her relationship with the royal family, Meghan will deliver the keynote speech at a summit for young leaders in Manchester later. The trip comes just days after her wide-ranging interview with a US magazine, in which she said it takes a lot of effort to forgive and hinted that she could say anything. This report from our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell contains flashing images.
Much has changed since this, their final appearance as working members of the royal family. It was the 9th of March 2020, days before lockdown and hours before the Sussexes departed for a new life across the Atlantic. The family settled here in Montecito, California, spending upwards of £12 million on a new home. It would provide plenty of space for Archie and sister Lilibet, born in June 2021. She first met her great-grandmother, the Queen, this June during the Platinum Jubilee weekend. Visits back to the UK have been rare. Harry returned for his grandfather's funeral and then the unveiling of the statue of his mother Diana. Overshadowing each return, the state of relations between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family. Later today, Meghan will speak at the One Young World Summit, an organisation she has been involved with since before she met Harry. Then the couple will travel to Germany to promote next year's Invictus Games. And then it's back to the UK to help promote Well Child, a charity Harry has long supported.
They will hope that there'll be some positive images and some good news stories coming out of these appearances in the UK, and to remind the UK and the public here of some of their philanthropic work and the good things that they do, not just the friction with the family.
And that family friction has been exacerbated by high-profile interviews, most notably opposite Oprah Winfrey in March 2021. Meghan spoke of her deep unhappiness, lack of royal support, and the bombshell claim that prior to son Archie's birth, a racist comment had been made by an unnamed royal about the colour of their baby's skin. In between events, engagements, and a growing number of legal actions, the revelations have kept coming. There's Harry's much anticipated autobiography, and just last month, Meghan gave a lengthy interview in which she was asked about forgiveness between her family, and the royal family. She said it takes a lot of effort to forgive. I've really made an active effort, especially knowing I can say anything. The suggestion that there may be more to reveal. The streaming giants Spotify and Netflix, which have paid them millions of dollars for content, should be delighted to hear that. This was the last time the couple were in the UK for the Platinum Jubilee. Prince Harry is currently embroiled in a legal dispute with the Home Office about the downgrading of his police protection. Citing security reasons, their representatives have declined to reveal details such as where they will stay and whether they plan to visit family members. Sarah Campbell, BBC News.
And joining us now is Emma Greenwood, who will be attending the One Young World Summit today as a youth ambassador. Emma, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the BBC News channel this morning. Tell us a little bit about the organisation and what it means to have Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, delivering that keynote speech later.
Yes, so the One Young World Summit brings together young leaders from all across the world tackling such a wide range of social issues, whether it be world peace, famine, poverty, education and the climate crisis. And obviously having the Duchess deliver a keynote speech at the opening is an incredible opportunity to bring attention to the work that young people are doing, but also to show young people that we have the support of influential public figures like the Duchess, and hopefully to show that to other young people as well, that adults believe in us and we have this power to cause change and to fight for what we believe in. And I do hope that the Duchess kind of speaking at the summit will bring attention publicly to that.
And yes, here we are talking about it now. But do you worry, are you concerned that there will be so much focus on what she's saying, how she looks, that it somehow overshadows the summit?
I mean, Meghan has done kind of continuous work to help with gender equality surrounding the One Young World organisation. And I think any attention is good in terms of empowering young people and showing them that, yeah, people do support them. And there is always the risk that that will happen. But I mean, from my experience, the Duchess has only ever wanted to support young people and amplify the work they're doing.
What have you made of recent coverage of Meghan and also what she has done in terms of interviews?
I think Meghan always continues to support young people, and both the Duke and Duchess continue to do that and fight a lot for their, as you said before, kind of philanthropic work they do. And she's hosted roundtables again at the Palace before, and she's done real kind of impactful work with young people. It isn't performative in any sense. I think she really does fight for what she believes in and wants to support young people and support the work they're doing. I think sees the value in that.
There's been a lot of negative coverage, though, hasn't there? If you look at coverage, especially here in the UK, there has been a lot of negative coverage of her. What do you make of that?
I think, again, it's when you're in the public eye, I think that's inevitable. And I think we as young people experience that a lot, whether you look at the youth strikes for climate and the controversy around them. But again, it's people standing up for what they believe in and taking a stance against injustices that they feel are against them. And I don't think you can necessarily penalise someone for that. And I think Meghan's seen that, and she again supports young people and people around the world when they choose to fight against that and to stand up to what they believe in and see the opportunity to fight for social progress.
OK, Emma, thank you very much for talking to us. Good luck for the event tonight. Emma Greenwood, who'll be attending that One Young World Summit today, where Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, will be giving the keynote address. Now, it's time for a look at the weather forecast, and let's catch up with the latest with Matt. Hi there, Matt.
Hi there, Annita. Very good morning, all. Lovely start to the week for many of you at the moment. Blue skies here on the north coast of Wales. Complete contrast to the big storms we saw last night. And it is really a week and so far a month of contrast, especially as far as rainfall is concerned. Some of you desperate for it. Some of you have already had more than enough. Particularly Tyree in Western Scotland. Average here is just over 100 millimetres for the entire month. We've already surpassed that. Whereas to Ipswich in the East Anglia and across many parts of East Anglia, we've not even had a millimetre of rain, barely a few drops, and those contrasts will continue this week. In fact, we've got showers in the forecast, and that will bring varying amounts of rainfall from one place to the next and from one day to the next as well. Now, you saw that we've had barely any rain in Ipswich, and that's even with the storms we saw last night. Over 36,000 lightning strikes as this system moved its way northwards. All the lightning has faded away from the mainland of the UK. Rain's still there, though, in the north of Scotland, which will clear the north of the mainland through this lunchtime. Outbreaks of rain, though, will come and go in Orkney and Shetland this afternoon with quite a breeze towards the southwest too, with another batch of really heavy showers starting to approach. But even before that arrives, we could see a few showers develop here and there, southern counties of England, Wales, and later into the Midlands. Now, as I said, it's windy in the north of Scotland. It's windy towards the southwest, but those winds are coming in from a south or southeasterly direction. We've had quite a bit of warm air. We started the day with temperatures in the teens. This afternoon, they're going to climb in the mid to high 20s. So it will be a pretty warm one once the sun is on you. Now, as you go into this evening and overnight, the showers across western half of England and Wales really will get going. They'll slide through Northern Ireland, Isle of Man, Northern England, and then later into Scotland. There'll be some, though, that stay completely dry. North of mainland Scotland and parts of East Anglia and South East will see very little rain at all. And temperatures here, 15, 16 degrees, as they will be for a fair few into tomorrow morning. But the reason for the showery and fairly variable amounts of rainfall this week is because we've got low pressure in charge. It's out to the west of us, only slowly pushing its way eastwards. As it gets closer for Tuesday, it means a greater chance a shower or two may come your way. There'll be a few spots to stay completely dry, and there'll be a few where it'll be wetter than others. Parts of central southern Scotland most prone to showers, as will parts of the southwest, southern counties of England and South Wales later. In the sunshine, it'll feel warm again, but there'll be more cloud around, greater chance of rain tomorrow, so temperatures will be down on today's values. Still quite breezy out there, as it will be through Tuesday night into Wednesday. Area of low pressure gradually pushing its way eastwards. Notice that isobars are becoming fewer in number and spreading out, so it means the winds will become a little bit lighter as we head towards the end of the week, but still with some showers around, and after a warm start to the week, it will feel a bit cooler to see the week out. Bye for now.
Morning. Come and have a seat. Now, of course, I'm not going to go easy on you. There are some really big questions we've got to try and get answers to this morning. But I'll be fair, and we just want to hear what you've got to say. So, shall we get on with it?
We're rolling.
Here we go. Join me to hear from the biggest names inside and outside politics.
Sunday with Laura Koonsberg. Sundays at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
The greatest classical music festival. Curated by us, enjoyed by you. There's nothing quite like the BBC Proms. Fridays and Sundays on 4 and iPlayer.
You experienced racism. Why didn't you walk away?
That's a really good question.
You're a politician. You read the polls.
I'm not a politician. I don't read the polls.
Yeah, you
I
are
sit
a
in Judiciary
politician.
Committee. No,
you are
I
very
I
definitely a politician.
No.
The very fact that there were not people who looked like you.
Hold on. I'm only halfway through my answer.
Is secret schooling happening across Afghanistan for girls?
It does.
You simply can't assume that.
Actually, yes, you can.
Hard Talk. Watch on BBC iPlayer.